Okay, good evening, everyone. And with some tech glitches, I am delighted to welcome everybody to Rogue Reads, a program of the Rogue Women Writers. We're a group of kick-ass women thriller writers that span the genres. And each month we host a Rogue Reads. And every month, I have to say, is my favorite. I just can't believe it's going to get any better. I'm going to introduce our lineup. I think one of our authors is having some tech difficulties, so we may flip-flop things in terms of questions, but I'm going to introduce this author as well. I'm going to go right down the line introducing everybody we're lucky enough to have here tonight, and then we'll get right into letting the authors talk, because that's who you are here to see and hear from. So, in alphabetical order, James Grippando is the winner of the Harper Lee Prize and the New York Times bestselling author of 30 novels of suspense, published worldwide in 28 languages. He's a practicing attorney specializing in entertainment and intellectual property law with multiple Tony Award-winning clients. And James is also an adjunct professor of law and literature at the University of Miami School of Law, where our Minnesota author is probably wishing she was right now. James's latest, Goodbye Girl, we are going to talk about a little later when I get to the books. But let's go down to, sorry, Chris, I know that came in late where James was spotlighted, but I'm going to hop to Stephen Hunter so we can introduce our next guest. Stephen won the Pulitzer Prize for Criticism, as well as the American Society of Newspaper Editors Award for Distinguished Writing and Criticism for his work as a film critic for the Washington Post. He is the author of many best-selling rap novels, including the New York Times bestsellers, Havana, Pale Horse Coming, and Hot Springs, and also the long-running Swagger series of books. I'm going in alphabetical order if nobody has gotten that yet. Lisa Malice earned her BS in psychology at the University of Minnesota and her MS and PhD at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Her debut novel, hold it up again, Lisa, I was behind you, Lest She Forget, is a psychological thriller, and it was a finalist in 5 unpublished manuscript contests. We always have a lot of emerging writers in the audience for Rogue Read, so I think Lisa's story is going to be particularly interesting. Get that, 5 unpublished manuscript contests. I didn't even know there were 5. Lisa is an active member of Sisters in Crime, International Thriller Writers, Mystery Writers of America, and the Authors Guild. And our fourth guest, not last but not least, DUANE SWIERCZYNSKI is a 2-time Edgar-nominated author of 10 novels, including Revolver, Canary, and a graphic novel, Breakneck, many of which are in development for film and TV. Most recently, DUANE co-authored Lion and Lamb with James Patterson and co-scripted Patterson's The Guilty, which was an Audible original starring John Lithgow and Bryce Dallas Howard. I love Bryce Dallas Howard. Just really want to say that.
Awesome.
I don't know why it matters, but I do. So we are here to speak to each author about their latest releases. And the way I usually do it is we'll go down that lineup again alphabetically, and I will introduce the book and ask a question, and then we'll move on to the next author and another question, and we'll keep going. Some people know that Rogue Reads listeners and viewers enjoy excerpts, reading. If an author would like to read tonight, they are more than welcome to. Please keep it to like a 2 to 3 minutes tops. If you don't want to read, I have more than enough questions to take us to like 10 o'clock tonight, which I promise I'm not going to do. So when we get to the reading, part of the program, just say, let's do questions instead. And I know that at least one of you is opting in for the more questions, which our listeners also enjoy. So James, let's talk about Goodbye Girl. And this is the intro I'm going to give to listeners. Miami criminal defense lawyer Jack Switek's latest client, Imani Nichols, is a Grammy-winning pop star whose career has skyrocketed. But despite her success, she's the most underpaid superstar on the planet because of an onerous record contract she signed as a teenager with her now ex-husband, who has made himself rich off her royalties. Some people's blood pressure might be climbing as I read. The case takes a deadly turn when salacious allegations of infidelity send Imani and her ex down a path of mutual assured destruction, each implicating the other in the unsolved murder of Imani's lover that happened 12 years ago. Despite their fierce denials, Imani and Shaky that's her ex, are both indicted for murder. Yet, as Jack is about to discover, uncovering the truth about the killing and the cryptic goodbye girl on the victim's chest won't just exonerate or convict his client. It could shape the future of the entire recording industry. So, piracy, it's such an interesting topic. James, will you tell us about, what's true about this? And is it not true, as I have always heard, that piracy is actually good for the creator, not for the seller, but good for the creator, the artist, because it brings like visibility to the art. You're frowning, so I can see I'm wrong. Tell us about piracy. Tell us all about what this novel is about.
Well, so it started 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, when in my law career, I was involved in the sort of the epic courtroom battle over the ownership of EMI records. And that case has lots of nuances, and I could talk a long time about that, but I won't. But what I will tell you is that it gave me, being in New York, in the Southern District of New York, Lower Manhattan, for 3 weeks during that trial, and working on the trial preparation for months and months before that. What I learned about the record industry, EMI, by the way, is, like, for anyone who doesn't know, is sort of the iconic label of the United Kingdom. I mean, it's everyone from, from Frank Sinatra to the Beatles to the Beach Boys to Mariah Carey signed at some point with EMI Records. And what I learned in that trial in 2010 was that piracy was killing the record industry, and it nearly killed EMI. And that's what the lawsuit was about, was that the buyer of EMI paid 5.9 billion euros. Felt like this is a pig in a poke, because it wasn't making, there was no money coming in except through syndication, meaning, like, you license a song to a commercial or a movie or a play or something. But the heyday of CDs and actually making money from records was gone, long gone. And I thought, hey, there's got to be a novel in this. But streaming came along, like Spotify and Pandora and so forth, and sort of almost in a way you would think, well, almost restores your faith in humanity, because it showed that, well, if people are offered music at a decent price, they'll actually pay for it. They're not, everyone is inherently a crook that steals. So piracy kind of went away. And then, just to wrap this up, because I don't want to monopolize everyone's time here with this, but what spurred the idea for the novel was actually, as everything else in life's problems today is answered by one thing, and that is Taylor Swift. Right? So Taylor Swift was sort of like my fictional Imani, was the victim of a terrible record contract with Scooter Braun, her manager. And she said, look, my first six albums, you're making all the money, not me. We need to renegotiate. And he took the posture of, too bad, so sad, a deal is a deal. And she did something really ingenious. She re-recorded her six albums. That's why we have Taylor's version of her songs. And she told her fans, buy Taylor's version. Don't buy the version that Scooter Braun makes all the money on. And they did. And so that was sort of like the light bulb moment. So some ideas, I'm sure the other authors will say the same thing. Some ideas hit you like a lightning bolt. Some percolate for years. For me, the piracy part percolated for years. But then when Taylor came along with this idea, this was the lightning bolt, right? And so I wasn't going to just have Imani, my fictional character, re-record all her songs. Instead, she would rather the money go to thieves than go to her manager ex-husband, and tells the world, go pirate. And they do. And of course, somebody ends up dead. And we can talk more about the story from there.
That's a great intro. Yeah, somebody ends up dead because it's a James Grippando novel. But yeah, that's a great intro. Thank you. Taylor's version, I heard her talk about it at one of her shows. It was a life moment. Thank you, James. Stephen, it's great to see you. Can you hear me? Is everything good with your tech?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. I
Sorry,
don't.
I'm a little nonplussed here because I've been randomly pushing buttons. And strange fireworks, Japanese pornography, World War II document, all that stuff is pouring over the net to me. But now it appears that we've connected, and I'm very grateful. And I'll try and be mellow.
The only problem is that you accidentally like enlisted ninjas that are descending on your house as we speak, but we're going to try to get the show in before,
Well, I apologize. I know the old man who doesn't get technology bit has gotten very thin, so I'm not going to play it. But I am an old man who doesn't get technology. Now we're okay. Shall we proceed?
We will. And please don't
Greetings to all
apologize.
my fellow authors. I'm very pleased to be in your presence. I'm sure you're all very talented professionals, and that's what I like best of all.
Hmm. We are happy to have you. And please don't stress really at all. Like, I'm a little bit whatever and have had my share of tech issues. Um, okay, so Stephen, I don't know if you heard your introduction, but I did introduce you, the Pulitzer Prize and the American Society of Newspaper Editors Award for Distinguished Writing and Criticism, author of many best-selling novels and the Swagger series. And now I'm going to introduce listeners to Front Sight, which has got to be one of the more interesting books I have come across. This collection of 3 interconnected novellas follows each generation of the iconic Swagger family. Grandfather Charles, Father Earl, and fan favorite hero Bob Lee. In The Night Train, Charles Swagger is on the hunt for notorious bank robber Babyface Nelson, where he traces a tip to the Chicago stockyards. And while there, he's brutally assaulted, discovering that the madman who attacked him is involved in a narcotics ring with plans to spread a new drug. This new drug makes some users happy, drives others insane, and kills many of the rest. In Johnny Tuesday, Earl investigates a violent bank robbery that left 2 dead and a fortune missing. At every turn, he's met with silence and hostility from the townsfolk, which makes sense when he uncovers municipal corruption, gang politics, jaded aristocrats, scheming gamblers, a hitman, and a whole bunch of men with guns. Finally, in $5 for the Gut Hook, these titles are great. A 32-year-old Bob Lee is back from Vietnam, nearly broken over good men lost for nothing. He's turned hard down that risky road to hell. But one afternoon, he's wakened from his nightmares by 2 men with a problem. A butcher has begun to prey on the city's young women. I'm a sniper, says Bob, not a detective. But, comes the reply, you're the son and grandson of 2 of the greatest detectives this state has ever produced. So please, I hope that intro was not too long, but I had to read it because it's so intriguing. Tell us about how Front Sight came to you and in this form and the unique structure, and tell us about it.
I'll try and be brief because it's a very long and unbelievably tedious story. This started as a screenplay 15 years ago for a perfect film noir. And although I had a perfect film noir in mind, it was not a perfect screenplay, and nobody could, I couldn't get anybody interested in it. That's how it goes. But I never threw it out, even though people advised me to. And a couple of years back, I wanted a new book, and B, easy money. And I thought this would work out very well here. I could just sort of write over the screenplay, change it easily into a novel, and get my easy money payoff. Unfortunately, it was an ordeal. It was a nightmare. It took a year. I quit 3 or 4 times. It was not easy. It was just utter misery. And when I was done with it, it was only 130 pages long. I realized then that it was too short for a novel and too long for a short story, if anyone still published the kind of short stories I'm capable of writing, which they don't. So I thought the best way to get this thing published is to sandwich it with 2 other shorter, what we call novellas, or I call. And so I wrote, since I had one with Earl, I wrote one with Charles, and then I had Bob Lee, and I wrote one with Bob Lee, uh, 1934, 1947, 1978. I also, because I'm a movie screwball and I was a professional film critic for 28 years, I indexed each story to a genre of that particular year. One is social realism, one is film noir, and one is an Italian horror movie called Giallo, which cannot be defended. It can only be enjoyed. It's terrible. I would urge anyone. I see all these very pleasant looking ladies and gentlemen. Folks, do not waste your time on it's not for you. These are for sort of extreme movie screwballs like me. And in each one of the stories I wrote, I tried to encapsulate the genre uh, specifics. I tried to the color of the blood. Giallo blood is always orange. Obviously, the other two being black and white, it's always black. I tried to sort of make him a a, a prose that's very evocative of that particular kind of movie. And you know, you tell me if it works. I don't know. It's what can we say? I tried my hardest. Maybe it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Maybe I'm a fool and a fraud. I don't know. So that's pretty much the story of this book. End of story. I got that in 34 minutes. That's not bad. Usually it
No,
takes an
I'm
hour
thinking
14.
maybe it'll bring novellas back. I mean, novellas are such fun. And all right, I think you might be at the forefront of something, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
my pleasure.
Okay, we're going to keep going down our line. Lisa Malice, lest she forget, this is what it's about. After surviving a car crash, Kay Smith wakes from a coma with amnesia, a battered face, and no one to vouch for her identity. Her psychiatrist is convinced that her memory loss is connected to the horrific flashbacks and nightmares haunting her. As she digs for clues to her past, Kay uncovers a shady character following her every inquiry. As she probes deeper, she realizes that everyone around her has secrets to hide, even herself. Emerging memories, guilty suspicions, and headline screaming murders push Kay to come out of the shadows and choose. Will she perpetuate a horrendous lie or risk her life to uncover the truth? And I wanted to say, Lisa, first off, congrats on being a debut. The great William Kent Kruger describes it as nothing else like it. And I'd love you to please share your journey to this novel, to publication, and also a little about Comcat, which seems like a very cool home to have found for your work.
Well, I love Camcat. I started writing this book back in 2013 after going to my first Killer Nashville conference. The idea just came to me one day, and I started doing a what if, and then had some kind of an idea. And so I went home and started pantsing it, just started writing it. And it took me a while to finish that first draft and go through multiple edits until the time when I thought it was ready. So I went to Pitch Fest at Thriller Fest and did all the pitching, got lots of recommendations or requests, but nothing came back. So I knew that there was a lot more work to do. I hired a developmental editor to tell me what was going on, with a critique, and then when it came back that I really had some work to do, I hired her to do a full developmental edit. And I went after it, and after I finished that, she was just really thrilled with what I'd done and started recommending me to some folks that she needed. This editor had already worked for St. Martin's Press in Crooked Lane, so I knew I had somebody in my corner. I did eventually find an agent, and that was during COVID. And she started going after all the big publishing houses, but didn't have much luck. We didn't really get much from the editors of why they were turning it down, but one editor, Crooked Lane, who I happen to know, she did give me a clue that, the first chapter wasn't really doing it. So I went back and redid that, and it was so much better. It was more action. And that after that, she had kind of run out of her connections, and so we decided to part ways. Then I started querying on my own to the smaller ones. I had, the low-hanging fruit publishers, and at one point I found out that Camcat was going to be at Killer Nashville. So I'd never heard of them. I looked them up. They were very young. They had only started in 2019, but I was intrigued by the publisher's story because she was an entrepreneur. She'd had a whole career in the technology software field, had built and sold companies over the course of her career. And my family is entrepreneurial too. So I always appreciate somebody who can start and build a great business. So she went and did all her homework before starting her own publishing company because she always wanted to be a writer. And her dad said, well, you need to have something to fall back on. So she went and, was a software engineer. So she did all her homework. She knew exactly what she should be doing to start and run a successful publishing house. And that really intrigued me. And then the submission, there was a submission form that took me a day and a half to complete, but they asked really intriguing questions and things that made me think. So I went to Killer Nashville, and that first day they gave me an offer. And it was just very, very exciting. But Camcat is wonderful, and they're really going places, and they've provided me a lot of support the whole time, whether it was coming up with a great cover. We all worked on that together. The audiobook, I got to help audition the talent, and that won an audiophile earphones award for not just the story, but the performances by the two readers. They've done a great job with pre-sales in terms of all my marketing, and I'm just having a great time with them.
Well, we're going to hear more about it, but that is fantastic. Congratulations. And that's the
Thank
best
you.
conference story ever. For emerging writers in the audience, there's such a wealth in Lisa's. And I'm sure after you read Lest You Forget, Lisa, you're available through your website and all that. People can check you out and learn more about your story.
Well, actually, I did talk to somebody today who had seen an article in my college sororities magazine. And she contacted through my website, and we talked today. She writes dystopian. So we talked for an hour and a half about publishing and what she should be doing.
That is really neat. I think that does start to happen when, you get published finally and you've had a journey to it. That's wonderful. So congrats again.
Thank you.
Okay. DUANE SWIERCZYNSKI. We talked a little bit about your background, and now I will introduce California. Sorry, I'm sort of forgetting where we are. These stories are so interesting. I tend to get very absorbed in them. California Bear. So Jack Queen has been exonerated and freed from prison thanks to retired LAPD officer Cato Hightower. But when guilt gnaws at Jack, he admits, I actually did it. To which Hightower responds, yeah, no kidding. Because the ex-cop has a special job in mind for the ex-con. 15-year-old Matilda has been handed a potential death sentence in the form of a leukemia diagnosis, but that's not going to stop her from tackling the most important mystery of her life. Is her father guilty of murder? Jeannie Hightower mends family trees for a living, but the genealogist is unable to repair her own marriage, and her soon-to-be ex may have entangled her in a scheme that has drawn the bloody wrath of a prolific serial killer who disappeared 40 years ago, only now emerging from hibernation. Get it? California Bear. So there is a fascinating cast of characters in this book, starting with the titular one, but continuing on. Can you speak about them, and can you just tell us about the book overall?
Sure, and thank you, Jenny, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. And my fellow panelists, I'm very blown away because James, I had no idea you were a Swiftie. That's kind of awesome. I love that. Stephen Hunter, I'm a huge fan going way back to Hot Springs. I'm heartbroken you're not a Giallo fan because I love those dumb Italian horror movies, but that's okay.
Oh, I am a big fan. I just don't like to tell polite people that I'm a big fan.
Okay, I was told like,
oh my
God, you have to love you like I do, but I'm a huge fan. And Lisa, I love your story is amazing. I mean, that's kind of like that persistence, that also that generosity is kind of wonderful. So I'm flattered to be on this panel with all of you. Thank you. As for the bear, it came from like really three weird sources. I read an LA Times piece about 5 years ago about a retired cop who frees wrongfully convicted felons. And, there's a great story about how this guy, actually, this felon, came out and lived with this cop for a while at his beach house. And I wondered, wow, what's their first beer like? You freed this guy, how cool is that? But I also wondered, because I'm a little mentally disturbed, what if the convict says, the felon says, you know what, buddy? I actually did it. Thanks, man. You know, I just thought, okay, that's, you know, what if he was wrong? Flash forward a month, and I saw, you know, the book "I'll Be Gone in the Dark" by that's Patton Oswalt's wife, Michelle McNamara, with this great book about the Golden State Killer before her untimely death. And I saw Patton do a kind of a book launch event with about his wife's book, and he discussed, you know, how fascinating, you know, hunting killers was almost like romance. Like cops talk about killers like, ooh, I like him. Ooh, he's the one. You know, all these romantic terms for like hunting a killer. That stuck in my head. And a month later, this is the sad part. Our daughter, our daughter Evie, was diagnosed with leukemia. So we spent a lot of time in the hospital with her. And while I was there, you know, we traded days. And while I was there, between treatments and everything else, a lot of time, I started writing what I thought was a comedic mystery about an ex-cop who blackmails an ex-con into blackmailing an ex-serial killer. I thought it'd be fun, you know. And I wrote that as honestly as an escape from that hospital room. You know, a few months later, we lost her, sadly. And I thought that book was toast. I thought, you know, I honestly thought I wouldn't write anymore. I didn't know what I would do. How do you like, you know, come back from that? But my daughter has always been kind of my biggest cheerleader, and I think she was nagging at me, you know. And a couple of years later, I resumed it. And when I realized that, yeah, this book has to be written, but also with her in that book, then it just kind of came to life, you know. And it's a weird origin story for what was supposed to be a comedic mystery, you know. But life has a funny way of making things not so comedic. And it's, you know, it's a matter of how you grapple with things like that, you know. And you know, to me, it was like therapy. I wasn't sure how anyone else would respond to this book, but I'm really happy that people have understood what I'm going for here. So yeah, it's a comedic novel about grief,
Yeah.
Lisa. Jenny, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
that's fine. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but
Oh, thank you.
gladdened that your daughter gets to live in the pages, and I understand what you mean about her being your cheerleader. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
that's a testimony. Okay, I have so many questions. Oh, we do have to get to drinks. I'm sorry, I've gotten so lost in the stories. I can't remember what everybody who's are, but we have a shot of bourbon. Claim the bourbon. Who's the bourbon?
I drink bourbon a lot. Too
It's for
much.
Stephen. Cheers
Thank
to
you.
Stephen.
Thank you.
Cup of coffee. It's gotten cold, but I still may delve in. And then we have a root beer and a beer drinker, but I didn't have root beer, and my beer is chocolate. So I thought that was kind of close enough. Everybody, I hope you are enjoying a drink as we sit with these wonderful authors. I'm going to go right down the line again, ask another question of each, and then we're going to, I know we have questions in the chat already, Chris. It sounds like looks like they're mounting up, and the possibility of reading experts. Let's go right down our line again. So, series. Series are always interesting to our audience. James, you write a successful long-running series. I believe Goodbye Girl is number 18. Is that correct? I think you're muted, James.
Sorry. Yep. Back out. Yes, it is number 18 in the series, and I just finished number 19.
Oh
So
my
I know
God.
that.
So, okay. So my question, I mean, it's pretty basic, but I know people are interested in this. How do you keep coming up with fresh premises? You told us about piracy and where it came from and the long, kind of genesis, but I mean more when you know that there's going to be another number 19. How do you come up with the premise? Is it just that kind of happenstance that you describe, or do you go after it in some particular way? And also, how do you grow with Jack? I mean, how does a character kind of grow with a long running series?
Yeah. What's interesting, if you just go back in time, this is, and that's why I was interested in listening to Lisa's story about the debut, because this is the 30th anniversary of my debut novel, 2024. But I still remember that path so vividly. And the first novel ended up, of course, I mean, like most writers, my first novel is not my first published novel. We've all have that script in the drawer next to our socks that never got published or something. But the first novel in the series was The Pardon, in which Jack made his debut as a criminal defense lawyer in Miami defending death row inmates, and his father was the law and order governor of Florida, who was signing their death warrants. I thought I had wrapped that story up nicely. And in fact, I wrote 5 standalone novels after that. And then I started getting emails from people about whatever happened to Jack. And it was my editor. And I've been very blessed in this whole journey, right? I've had the same literary agent, well, sort of the same, Artie Hine originally, but I'm now represented by his son. Artie passed away in 2000. Same publisher, HarperCollins, since 1993. And for 24 of my 30 novels, I had the same editor, which is really about as monogamous as it gets in this business. But I never intended it to be a series. And so when in 2002, when it was really Carolyn Marino was my editor, when she really said, we got to go back. We should go back to Jack, and I answer all those hard questions about, well, it's been 8 years. What am I going to do? Pretend like, is he 29 now? Is he just aged 1 year in the last 8 years? And so the answer is Jack has evolved a lot over this. He's, and he's not autobiographical, but I think his path is sort of mirrored mine in some ways. Jack got married, had kids, got a dog. I have a dog, whatever sure, there are some parallels there, but yeah, Jack grows up a lot. And I think the readers really like that about him. And so I think that also helps to your question, because Jack is in such a different place, throughout the series, that his approach to the cases that he handles and the types of cases that he takes, that also evolves. So it isn't really as hard as you would think to keep the series fresh, because Jack is evolving. I don't really know where he's going. Yeah, all of these stories, even though I think there's, the plots are pretty tight. I never outline the plot beyond the point of conflict in the story. The conflict works its way out in the writing. I think that also helps keep the series fresh, and that I may surprise myself with the end of the book. So, and then lastly, I think sort of what keeps it fresh is it's a very rich ensemble cast. It started with Jack and the father-son tension with his father, who was signing the death warrants, and then Jack has this best friend, Theo Knight, is the only client he ever had who was on death row and actually innocent. So Theo, of course, lives his life making up for lost time, which makes for an interesting sidekick. And then you have Jack and Jack's wife is an FBI agent. And so you've got a criminal defense lawyer married to an FBI agent, which has its own inherent tension. So all of those things, I think, lend itself to a series that I don't get tired of writing, and hopefully readers don't tire of reading.
Well, they clearly don't, but I think your answer actually speaks to something that I was going to suggest contributes to freshness, which is you really do delve into the emotional and domestic level. I mean, the relationships are obviously a big part of your work, as well as the situations. And I wonder if that somehow adds, you look like you're either agreeing or disagreeing.
I'm totally agreeing. Yeah. Actually, I was fretting because I just realized I am down to my last swallow of wine. But
well, if you need to,
yeah, it's interesting because I speak to children a lot in schools, and they'll ask me, so what's your new book about? And some of it's like it doesn't, it doesn't translate to a fifth grader, and it probably shouldn't translate to a fifth grader. The problems are too heavy. And it's so great that you said the books are about relationships, because that's what I tell them. That's what my books are about. They're about relationships. They really are. I tend not to, I don't really gravitate to the stories where the answer is it's all a big conspiracy. It's usually something very close to home and very personal to Jack, or very personal to the worthy adversary that I've created for whatever is driving the story.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for that answer. And Stephen, I think I would ask, I mean, I kind of can't decide between two questions, so maybe I'll just answer them back to back, which is about the series element and keeping characters, evolving. And also your career in film criticism. And you seem to have a good ability to blend different topics. So maybe you'll find a way to blend that sort of evolving character and the critique of films. And I don't know where I'm going here.
That's okay. I don't either. Well, as far as the series is going, as far as the discipline of maintaining a series, I don't really know much about it. And the reason is I never really thought of myself as writing a series. Now, it turns out when I wrote the first book, I had no idea there would be a second one. And I wrote the second one, I had no idea there'd be a third one. It's just that each book seemed to raise questions. And the only way you could answer those questions was by writing another damn book. And so here I am. And in my case, I published my first book in 80. So here I am 44 years later, and I'm still hitting the keyboard every damn day. I'm sick of myself, but that happens to everybody at my age. I will say that what has helped me is that some people have chosen to, when they do a series, they have an eternally 35-year-old hero. I have no idea in hell how a 35-year-old man would feel. So I've always tried to keep them as close to my age as possible. And I've tried to sort of be grounded in the reality of elder life, the pains, the health issues, now here's my joke about getting old. Your fingers no longer work. So if you take a dime and put it between your fingers like this, and you walk to the other side of the room and you look, the dime has vanished. Okay. But see, that's okay because you have no idea why you picked that dime up in the first place. So I try and get that reality. I'm proud of the fact that I'm the only writer that I know of who has a hero, a killer, a manhunter, a tracker, a tactical genius, a ballistics genius who fell out of a tree. And because, at my age, I fall all the time, and falling is a reality of being that age. And that's the kind of sort of grit level, street level physical reality that I try to keep the books grounded in. And as for the plots, who knows where they come from? Usually I steal them from someone. My main issue is I'm worried about being sued. Nobody has sued me yet. They just sort of, when I need them, they're there. And now and then I'll get a goose that I feel very fiery about. And other times I'm not terribly enthusiastic, but I've signed paper and taken money. So who cares if I'm enthusiastic? I've got a job to do. And as I say, 44 years, still sitting at the keyboard. That's really it. Does that make any sense? Okay.
Yeah, and that's a lot.
Move on to someone else.
I will. But I mean, and I think putting that reality on the page as you do probably is very welcome to readers because, it's not Instagrammable and life is not Instagrammable. So,
That's true.
Lisa, you are you a psychologist or I wasn't sure what your
psychologist.
Yeah.
I'm an organizational psychologist, actually. Worked in
what kind?
Organizational, worked in the corporate setting.
So the book, lest you forget, it deals with, memory and dissociation and intrusive thoughts in the form of nightmares and flashbacks. And I'm wondering how your psychology background led to the creation of Kay and the story in general.
Well, the idea for the story just came to me, but I'm as not a clinical psychologist, I didn't know much about different types of amnesia, what the causes were, what a psychologist or psychiatrist might talk with a patient and helping them to better understand what was going on. But I do have a broad base of psychology experience. As a PhD, you have to learn everything, personality and all that stuff, even if you're not really ever going to use it much. But so I just did my research, and I found out there were, 3 different types of amnesia. Retrograde is the one most people are familiar with. That's where you can't remember your past. There's also anterograde, which is more often associated with different medical issues, because that's where you can't remember anything going forward. So many people with dementia and things like that. Dissociative fugue is a wholly psychogenic type of amnesia. It's considered actually a defense mechanism, so that somebody who has gone through an awful lot of trauma, for example, soldiers with battle fatigue or a shell shock, they would wander away from the battlefield, not knowing who they are, not knowing where they're going. And if they were lucky, they came back and remembered who they were before they got shot or killed by the enemy. So I did a lot of research on that. And then also looked more at, what this person would be experiencing. So understanding the anxiety and the fears and not knowing who you are. Also, a part of the story I learned from my doing more research on different therapies. So when they talk about learning more about who you are just by observing your own behavior, your thoughts, what your physical body looks like, it's part of I can't even remember the word. It's focusing your mind so that you can draw out clues from your own self. So what does this finger tell you? If there was a ring on there, what that tell you? If there's no ring, that doesn't necessarily tell you that you're not married. Do you have stretch marks and things like that? So I had to do quite a bit of research to better understand the condition and what the solutions were. And most people who are in dissociative fugue do snap out of it, but some people don't. And Agatha Christie actually supposedly had an episode of dissociative fugue after her husband asked her for a divorce. That was shortly after her mother died. She just got in the car one day and drove off. She was found at a wonderful seaside spa 2 weeks later. But somebody saw her walking on the road, and she was barely wearing anything during December. And so, we really don't ever know what really happened.
Oh, it's interesting.
But she never told anybody. But most people, when you have dissociative fugue, they do not, they don't even recall what they did during that episode. So they don't even remember being gone.
Right. And I guess all people do it in tiny little ways, but
yeah,
that's fascinating. Well, okay. Thank you, Lisa. DUANE, I don't know if I'm right in saying this, but I feel like California has a connection to killers. And a lot of states do, but maybe California comes to mind for some reason. And I got more of a sense of why the darkness is there in the novel, as well as you said, it's a comedic horror story. But tell us about, dealing with the serial killer genre, but in such a new way, and just tell us about killing. I think there's even a tagline like "the killer in all of us" at some point, and so talk a little about that if you would.
Well, director Shane Black has this great joke. I think it's in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang that, California is so weird because it's as if someone took the country and shook it, by the East Coast up top. All the normal people hung on, all the crazies fell on California. I think that's a gag in that movie. And it's not entirely true. However, California does attract very much, eccentric, free thinkers, and that can lend itself to all kinds of behavior. My fascination, honestly, with killers, I honestly did not set out to write a serial killer book. That to me is like, oh God, not another one. We don't need more of those. It was more the, I wanted to write an anti-serial killer book, really. I found myself watching a lot of these, it's kind of, we have a true crime boom. We've had it for years now. A lot of very slickly produced, beautifully, edited, really entertaining stories about people's worst possible day. It's like, and that's the disconnect for me. It's like, wow, I'm being entertained by this nightmare someone endured and may not have lived through, or their families are still grieving. And I thought, God, what is that about? Why are we entertained by this stuff? So a part of it, is tackling that. It's meant to be it's a serial killer novel in a very different way, an anti-slasher, I kind of call it. So to say more would be a spoiler, honestly, but honestly, it's more of a satire than it is like embracing, and I do love a great serial killer movie or a book like Zodiac. David Fincher's Zodiac is brilliant. I just adore that movie. Same in Mindhunter. It's like, the ones that kind of sink into the characters, that the real people involved, not in Manhunter and The Silence of the Lambs. There's great, Thomas Harris. He's brilliant at this stuff. But also, I think there's a lot of glamorizing, killers that as a human being does disturb me. And I think we write because we trying to work out what disturbs us. So that's kind of, I think, why I kind of went into it kicking and screaming, knowing it had to be a serial killer novel, but I didn't want to really glamorize it, or I wanted to show the the everyday version of it.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
no, it does in an interesting way. And you were skewering in a way the whole true crime business, the mechanization of crime.
yeah, it's like, it's a true crime industry. It is like we have superheroes, we have serial killers. It's like, wow, what are we doing to ourselves? In a lot of ways. It's interesting. Don't judge me. I'm really not trying to judge. I enjoy true crime like the best of us. I really do. But yeah, I can't help but be human if I don't think, what are we doing? What is this about?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. We could do a whole talk on that in of itself, I think, killing and how we all write about it in some form or another. But I am aware of the time. I mean, I wasn't at all aware of the time. And Stephen, you talk about changes with age. I can barely see those numbers, but I'm pretty sure it says 751. That's because I won't wear glasses. I'm like a decade past when they say you have to get glasses, and I'm so
Yeah, do
proud
it.
of that.
Readers usually your friend. Do it. Your friend.
Okay. Anyway, do we have time, Chris? I know we have a bunch of questions in the chat, but if some of our authors would be willing to read a really brief excerpt, that'd be great. I do have more questions for those who do not, or we could turn to the chat, but let's just go alphabetically again. James, did you want to read an excerpt? If you do not want to, you will not upset anybody. You're muted, James.
I can barely see the screen because I'm not wearing my glasses, so I'm not even going to take a stab at reading. And I would be ad-libbing, not reading.
That could be fun too, but that's fine. Okay. Stephen, would you like to read an excerpt?
No, I would not. I do have my glasses, and that's the reason why I don't want to read, because I can see my prose too clearly. So let's just pass on the. So now I'm not a gifted reader, and it sounds like it'll kill the audience. So let's
more than fine. We're all having a great time, and we don't need to read. I'd like to get to some of those. Lisa, are you going to be? Yeah, you're a debut, so you could read an excerpt if you would like to, and we will just showcase your debut novel.
No, that's perfectly fine. There's lots of questions. I'd practice my first 2 pages, but all that's available online at Amazon to read. So let's take the questions.
Okay, I do want to encourage everybody. First of all, thank you for coming to Rogue Reads and just making this such a fun part of the month. I do want to encourage absolutely everybody to buy California Bear, Lest She Forget, James Grippando's New Goodbye Girl, Stephen Hunter's very interesting trilogy of novellas, Front Sight. Buy these books. You will be entertained and gripped in really unusual ways. This will be one of the most unusual lineups we've had just in terms of the books on Rogue Reads. So go out, get yourself to a bookstore or Amazon and buy your 4 new reads for the month. Yeah, and let's take some of those questions. Chris.
Well, I want to know if Dwayne wanted to read, because he didn't say whether he did.
Was the one who I knew did not want to read. Sorry for everybody.
Thank you, but yeah.
Dwayne and I had a little, no reading thing before, so.
I absolutely love, and our readers love to hear our authors read from their books. I just want you to know that if people ask you to do it in the future, it's amazing how many people will write in and say how much they loved hearing the authors read from their books. So
I do wonder why. Honestly, I do wonder why. Because
I
I mean,
think because you
my
put your own voice to it,
I
and
guess
so
so.
they're hearing how the author intended it to come across. And
I'm the
that is,
last person. I'm the worst person to have it come across. Honestly,
well,
I don't know, but I don't speak for everybody else. But I just to me, it's always like horrifying when I try to read my own stuff.
well, we're
So
not going to make you, but I'm just pointing it out. I think it's because people like an author's interpretation of their own work, and they view it that way. So,
I'll be happy to read if you want, if that's what you want.
I'm not going to make you read. I think we can go on, but I just wanted to say that because I think everybody, as an author, I'm the same way. I go, oh my God, I don't want to read, but I can tell you, it's often so well received.
I have
So
this
we have.
this discussion's reminding me of a very funny cartoon I just saw the other day where there's a very crowded audience in a bookstore, and there's the author sitting at the front of the crowd at a table with his nose in the book, and one of the people in the audience looks at the other one and says, "Don't they usually read out loud?"
good.
So we do have a couple questions. We don't have a lot of questions, so I'm sure Jenny has more. But I have one question I would like to ask everybody, and that is, how do you work? And I mean that in the sense that Steve Barry will tell you it's a day job. He works 8 hours a day. Some people I know use dictation when they dictate their books and then like transcribe them. Other people put in 2 hours and call it good, or go to Starbucks. Or so what's your environment like, and how do you actually look at your workday?
We'll go right down
I
the line.
work very hard. No. I,
Um, I, my brief answer is that I I uh, I don't have that notepad beside the on my nightstand that I used to have anymore. So to that extent, I think I am a little. I've adopted the Steve Barry methodology a little bit. Is that because I learned that those flashes of inspiration at 3 a.m. that I thought were such great ideas very rarely turned out to be great ideas, and so I do tend to compartmentalize a little bit more now than I did when I first started out writing, and it's worked out very well now. Um, and uh, and maybe this says something about my personality. We do have a psychologist here who can who can tell me what this means, but I tend to work pretty linearly, right? I know writers who they'll write the big climax to the book and then sort of fill in the background. I mean, I really have trouble, skipping ahead to from paragraph 3 to paragraph 7. I don't even do that. I won't move beyond paragraph 3 till I've finished it, and then 4 and 5 and so forth. So I don't know. I think that's I don't like I said, I don't know what that means exactly, but that definitely is my methodology.
Well, that's fascinating. I've never heard anybody talk about the linearity of it. Stephen, you were saying something. It was either you work very hard or you don't work very hard.
I don't work very hard. I don't like to work. I like to lay on the sofa and watch sports and drink wine or beer. Anyway, yeah, to me, the most important thing is to make contact with the book every day, enter the book's world every day. That may involve writing, it may involve thinking, it may involve research, but the hardest thing and the way books die is when you lose contact with them and you skip a day, then you skip another day, and then you skip a month, and then you skip another year, and suddenly the book is dead and you're nowhere. So the important thing is to make that contact, enter the world with the book. I'm a great believer in what I call, well, if I had a bit of advice to give anyone, I don't have to give it to any of these folks because they clearly, obviously are following, but it's as follows: do the damn work. I hear from people all the time who are so talented and so wonderful, but darn it, They just couldn't finish the book. You got to finish the book or you can't play in the game. If you don't get that, you lose. You're gone. Goodbye. Don't waste my time. Do the damned work. That's it.
Do the damn work, Stephen Hunter.
We're going to quote you on that.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I don't think I'm the first person to say that. And I doubt
it's succinct. It's to the point. Okay, great. DUANE or Lisa. Sorry, I forgot alphabetical order. Lisa, with your new process.
But pardon? What was the question?
What's your process?
Oh, my process. Yeah. Well, my process has changed over the years because when I first started, my husband was still working. So I would have and with the kids out of the house, I had most of the day to have fun writing and things like that. And it wasn't work. If people are thinking that writing is a lot of work, maybe they should try some other job. Because I had so much fun doing that. But when my husband retired, we moved to Florida. So I'm a very early riser, sometimes 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I get most of my work done before he even, bats open an eye in the morning. I do work during the day. He's always puttering in the house, working on the boats and things like that. But we try to make time for each other in the regular day. But the hardest thing that I've had to deal with is being a debut author and all the work and marketing it takes to do all that. So, I mean, I can't stand being on Facebook and things like that, but you have to do some of that stuff to promote yourself. You're writing blogs, you're doing interviews, and I love it all. It's a lot of fun, but it can take a real toll on your time for, writing, and especially for a debut author who nobody knows. And so people like James and Stephen and DUANE, who, they don't have to do as much. They have publicists and stuff, but it's a lot more work than I ever understood. I enjoy it, but I would like to spend more time working on the next book.
You'll get there. You'll get there. DUANE.
Oh wait, it's just as awkward. By the way, I've did my 11th book. It's just as awkward and weird. Trying to promote your stuff. It's not what I want to do. I always thought being a writer meant you can hide behind your work. What a joke, right? You guys actually, be in public. That's bizarre. But the springboard off something Stephen said about daily contact, that's important for me. Like my breakthrough when I actually learned that, okay, a daily word count every day, like just 1,000 words a day, whatever it is, it can be 250 words every day, do something to push it forward. That's huge. So my process is when I'm actively writing a book, it's, maybe 1,000 words a day. The next day, I'll go back and revise those 1,000 words. So it's almost like advance, retreat, kind of throughout. So I'll end up doing I do one big draft, but it's honestly maybe 100 drafts. I constantly revise what's come before. I'm never really happy with what's come before until I fine tune it, but always make sure I advance a bit. So that's important to me. That for me is a breakthrough. Once I did that, I actually finished the first book. I had a lot of half-finished, manuscripts that, if you don't have contact with it, they die on the vine. They just sort of fade away. It really is a steady commitment. That to me was huge. It may sound simple, but it was my breakthrough back in the day.
Bruce wants to know what everyone is working on.
Oh.
Let's go right down the line.
Yeah. I mentioned I'm under contract to write yet another one in the series. So and that one's just finished, and there actually will. So what I'm working on now, which is, and I think other authors can probably relate to this too, is that you're talking about this novel. I'm actually thinking about the novel that's coming out in 2026. So, if somebody's asking me, what's your new novel? That's a really ambiguous question to me, because they're talking about the one that's in the bookstores. I've already written the next one, and to me, the new novel is the one coming out in 2026. So all three of those will be Jack Switek novels.
Stephen?
I'm too old to do anything that isn't fun. So I'm at a stage in my career where I'm just going to have fun. So I am actually writing a Western. I've loved Westerns my whole life. I've seen 15,000 Western movies. And I'm just really sort of in pig heaven. That's really all. And it'll be, I found a really hokey way to unite it with the Swagger clan. It's as thin as the paper on the wall, but there's certain commercial compromises you have to make. And so that's what I'm doing.
Oh, but fans
Yeehaw.
love that. The swagger's in a whole new world kind of thing.
That's right, exactly. As soon as I figure out which end of the horse goes first, I'll be set.
Great. Lisa, what's next for our debut author?
I started a novel a few years ago while I was querying. It was inspired by learning about black market baby markets in the 30s and 40s in Tennessee. Joan Crawford adopted somebody from a child from this notorious adoption agency. They would go out and steal babies. And then there was an episode of that in the 50s and 60s in northern Georgia. And so I started tossing around an idea on that and worked on that. But it was more from this perspective of the children of these and learning that they were stolen. And funny thing is that my husband did the 23andMe a few years back after I started this. And one day he got a response or query from somebody claiming to be a first cousin. Turned out he had 4 new first cousins that he never heard. But that was and these children were all adopted out by the mother. They weren't stolen or anything, but I thought that was rather interesting that happened. So that helped inspire some of the story as well.
Wow.
You definitely deal with mysterious, things come to light that.
Right.
Well, I can see the making of a brand, Lisa Malice, with your fantastic name, best debut author name I've heard in a long time. Duane, what's next?
I've been actually working for a while on a nonfiction book. It's crime though. It's about I have a relative. My grandfather's cousin was a cop in Philadelphia who was gunned down by a gangster, March 1919. And I looked into the murder, and it's like the gangster, by the way, is like Philly's Joe Pesci. I like the guy. He's hilarious. It sounds awful. He killed a relative of mine. I should hate this guy, but he's sort of fast. It's a great untold mob story. So I've been delving into this, and in a weird way, it's like almost like a exercise working through grief, because I don't believe there's ever a bad guy. There's bad guys, but there's also, to me, villains are people with unfortunate agendas. And this guy, I do feel for him in a weird way. So I've been delving into this sort of 100-year-old murder by this sort of gangster character. He was a bigamist. He was a counterfeiter. He was a killer. He was the first mob snitch in Philadelphia. So I'm loving all this research. So I need to actually write this damn thing this year.
So the good bigamist mob snitch killer character we all know and love, don't know and love.
Yes.
I think the best advice someone ever gave me once was that the villain is the hero of his own story, and to keep that in mind. And it's so true, because if you think of it that way, they always think they're right, and they think they're doing it for noble reasons often, or if not noble, just because it's better for them. But still, it makes them so more real. We have one more question that Lisa, and I think maybe you could put it in the chat for this woman if you'll look at the question. You mentioned that type of editor that helped you get a great deal. I don't know exactly what she wants you to repeat that information.
Oh, okay. Well, in the business, there are independent editors out there who have the skills to look at your manuscript, read your manuscript, and go do a deep dive on what the problems are. I just happened to run into this person through one of my other contacts. And I was doing webinars for Sisters in Crime, my local chapter at the time, and I just contacted her to possibly be on a webinar with us. So it turned out when I started talking to her that she had worked for 2 major mystery publishers, and I told her what was going on with my manuscript, and that's when I decided to hire her to do the critique. And then when that came back, I said, let's go do a full development edit. These things can be pretty expensive. I think I spent a few $1,000s on getting her feedback, but it made all the difference. So it's a matter of going out there, And if you're involved with any organizations like Sisters in Crime, Mr. Ezra America, the Guppies out of Sisters in Crime, you can always start querying people, asking questions in the chats about recommendations for editors. And do your homework on who they are and who they have edited, and what price point you're willing to pay to get the work done. But if you want to contact me at lisa@lisamalice.com, we can talk some more.
Wow.
Thank you.
I just unmuted. Thank you very much. Can I unmute and say something? I actually don't write fiction. I write nonfiction. But when you were talking about that, I thought, oh, I have a friend who's been working on a fiction piece for a long time. And I had never heard of a developmental editor before. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being in the audience. And let me just say a big vote of thanks to our lineup tonight, which was so fun. I can't believe we've come to the end of another show. Stephen Hunter, get his latest front sight and look for that Western with the swaggers. James Grippando, get his latest. Jack Switek, number 18, Goodbye Girl, but know that there is a 19th coming along. Lisa Malice, yes, you can hold it up again. Her debut, Lest She Forget. And DUANE SWIERCZYNSKI, California Bear. And we'll be looking out for the nonfiction book with the bigamist everybody's going to come to love. I cannot thank you all enough for being part of Rogue Reads. We're really a family here, and the Rogues appreciate you, and our audience members appreciate you. Thank you, Chris, for expert tech wrangling, and everybody stay warm.
I want to say for our readers and our guests that next month on February 12th, Jenny is going to host Lisa Black, John Land, and Jeff Ayers, who have a new book out, Mark Greeny, and Kemper Donovan. So it should be a good lineup. That's February 12th at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to our lineup, James and Stephen and Lisa and Wayne. It was great getting to talk to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Oh.